Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Donjo number 1702 in a 613 finish. This is a roller latch with a T-strike. I have one removed from the packaging here. This is a very typical and common roller latch. If you have a solid core door, 3068, 3070 especially, this would be a very appropriate roller latch. This is a very generic sort of design in the body. And then the only options really are finish, of course, but then the strike plate that you would get. And this is the T-strike option. The 1702 would give you a T-strike. If you use your imagination, you can see why we call it that. You can order these with like a full lip strike or a 4 7/8 strike intended for use in a hollow metal jamb. Again, very typical, common, generic. If you're looking at this to solve your problem, you're probably on the right path because it handles 1 3/4 thick solid core doors that are 100+ pounds. I've sold these to people quite recently in the last few years where they're installing a front door of their home and they have just a bolt, a decorative deadbolt, a commercial deadbolt, large pull handles mounted back to back, so there's no latching. And what the client will do is literally take those pull handles and pull the door closed and key or thumb turn the deadbolt closed, but something needs to keep the door in the closed position so that it's closed and not just going to swing back open. And the roller latch provides that. Sometimes people will order 2 of them for an especially large door just to keep it in the closed position. So you're going to use these not in residential doors, 1 3/8 or hollow core doors. This is overkill. You want a ball catch most likely for those installations, or a much smaller roller latch, but something like this, a roller catch. A roller latch like this would be intended for heavier doors. Now, there is a link below this video to the template, and let's review that because it will also act as really the installation instructions. Let's go over the dimensional properties. The overall height of the body itself is 3 3/8 with a width on the body of basically 15/16. It's closer to 1 inch, as you can see. Forgive me. Yeah, 1.03, forgive me. That's exactly correct. So just heavy on 1 inch. Overall depth of the body, they have at 1.6 inch. So 1 5/8 roughly. Okay. Height of that body, about 2 1/8. And they do give that dimension at 2.17. So the installation, they don't tell you how to install it, but they give you the dimensional properties. And what you're going to do is first determine the height at which you're going to install it. If it's a single door, I would suggest installing it somewhere equal to the height of the other lock set preps in the area if you have them, or simply installing them, at a handicap compliant sort of height from the floor, generally about 40 inch from the floor, maybe 40 1/4 from the floor to the center line of the strike, because that will give you a very compatible height of not only other strike preps that you'll see, but where you're going to install most likely an edge pull or dummy trim or a push-pull sort of plate scenario. It will allow you to have that installed near the height where you're going to be physically pulling on the roller latch to give you an ability to pull that open without twisting or torquing or warping the door whatsoever. So the height, obviously you'll determine that, but something in that range to be compatible. If it's a pair of double doors, obviously in the header, anywhere from maybe 4 inch from the edge to the center line, maybe as much as 6 inch, but somewhere in the center. And if you are doing a pair of doors that, or a single door for that matter, that it does not have a stop, there is a different kind of roller latch that will integrate a stop, a 90-degree stop in the design, which we can help you with. Now, mortising it. Determine where you're going to put it. Mortise it. Well, they give you the outside dimensions as we've gone over, and I feel that the woodworker's best friend is not the router, but is actually the caliper. So what I like to do when I mortise this stuff, especially if it's the first time, and I have the hardware first, and you don't need to have the hardware to mortise from these dimensions naturally, but a lot of people really want that hardware so that they can measure it and do a reality check prior to, cutting into your Anna-Gray veneer door, something that if oak's, you know, $100 for a door, Anna-Gray's $1,000 for a door. It makes perfect sense. Now what I like to do is get that caliper and verify the dimensions against the template and then proceed accordingly. And of course I will mortise the hardware and test along the way and make any adjustments. One thing I like about this 1702 is you can see there's a slight bevel on the edge or a radius to the profile that gives the illusion that it's actually wider on the top than it is measured on the bottom. And that's not because it's an illusion, because it actually is. And what you can do is, with a piece of hardware like this, is you'll be able to mortise that with that beveled edge, and when you put your caliper on it and you basically mortise it to that dimension with a small amount of margin, when you insert this into the hardware, into the edge of the door or the header or wherever you're putting it, you'll achieve a very nice tight margin around the perimeter of the faceplate. Now, once you determine what you're going to mortise and you study the piece of hardware, you can see the two screw holes. So obviously your mortise has to stay well away from those holes so that when you sink the screws down, you're not going to be hitting a void. So you might want to mortise this width, mortise this thickness, measure it, and then mortise accordingly. A little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, just as long as your work after mortising it is minimized. Keep in mind your bit is round, so you don't want to exert a lot of energy having to radius, or I should say square the corners out of that pocket. But your mortise will be in two steps. You've got the body, which is the width, the thickness, up to the edge of the door, and then your plate, which is just the width, the height, and then the thickness of the plate, and that would be your installation. Okay. Obviously, installing for the strike is going to be the thickness of it, 2 3/4 tall. They have the thickness of this at basically just less than a 16th, 0.057. Overall height's going to be 2 3/4. Overall width of the strike is about 1 13/16 inches, but strikes are really measured from the center line of the screw hole to the edge of the lip, and that's how they're defined. So this is about 1 3/8, and that would be typical and standard for strikes, 1 3/8, 1 5/16. If you ordered an extended lip strike, they would be defining the extension or the lip length as a dimension referenced from the center line of the screw hole to the edge of the lip, just to edify you as to how that's measured, if it's at all important. Obviously, different finishes you'll be able to acquire this in from Donjo, and let's go over that now. Obviously, 613 for oil rubbed bronze, and that would be this item that we're reviewing. That's oil rubbed bronze. You'll be able to do this in a 605 for polished brass, 619 for satin nickel, 620 for antique nickel, and then 626 for satin chrome. Not sure why they don't have polished chrome here. That might be an error, and I will investigate that, and if it does show up, it will show up as a 625 part number would be polished chrome. Yeah, and indeed, they don't list polished chrome. If you need polished chrome, reach out to us. We'll be able to set you up with a vendor that can do that. You're going to get, of course, screws. You're going to get machine screws and wood screws for your body installation. You'll get 2 longer wood screws for the strike. They're obviously assuming you're going into a wood frame. You could be putting this into a hollow metal frame, provided that the hollow metal frame was specifically manufactured for a T-strike, which would be atypical. You would generally have it prepped for a 4 7/8 ANSI style strike. Okay. Now, finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page. Oh, I need to discuss something. Adjustable is what this is. You can loosen, tighten those screws to increase or decrease the amount of tension that is set on these larger springs. And then when the roller makes contact with the strike and it will be depressed, it's going to drive that bigger spring to allow it to compress and then come back out. The tighter you make that, the less projection. You back that out a little bit, it'll be sticking out further, and that will allow you to compensate for an unusual gap, maybe too small, maybe too large, but also to help account for the weight of the door, how much pressure you want the roller to have to encounter to pull it free or to push it closed. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Danjo products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Now, the name Danjo is quite synonymous with trim and auxiliary hardware, and if you do know their name, you'll know it because of their door reinforcing wraparound plates and their latch protectors. Those are the two lines that they are most widely known for. There is that link below this video to the website. You'll be able to look up not only all of the Danjo products that we sell, a link to the manufacturer's website, along with the full line catalog, but we've broken that full line catalog up into its constituent parts, and you'll be able to review the primary categories from Danjo. If you know them for latch protectors and door reinforcing plates, look at their other stuff, because here's why. They do a good job when it comes to trim and auxiliary. The ancillary hardware like roller latches, flat goods like kick plates and push plates, mop plates, armor plates, etc. They will be able to help you with extended lip strikes as well. They get into hinges, some fancy ladder pulls as well. They have a relatively petite footprint within the industry, but they're nimble. They're good. When you pick the phone up, you usually get one or two or of three people, and they take care of you really good, and that's why we continue to send business their way. Any questions on the Danjo 1702 roller latch and a 613 finish, or any other Danjo product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.